Denry actually thought of marriage. An absurd and childish thought, preposterously rash, but it came into his mind. And what is more, it stuck there. He pictured marriage as a perpetual afternoon tea, alone with an elegant woman, amid an environment of ribboned muslin, and the picture appealed to him very strongly. And Ruth appeared to him in a new light. It was perhaps the change in her voice that did it. She appeared to him at once as a creature very feminine and enchanting, and as a creature who could earn her own living in a manner that was both original and ladylike. A woman such as Ruth would be a delight without being a drag. And, truly, was she not a remarkable woman, as remarkable as he was a man? Here she was living amid the refinements of luxury, not an expensive luxury. He had an excellent notion of the monetary value of things, but still luxury. And the whole affair was so stylish. His heart went out to the stylish. The slices of bread and butter were rolled up. There now was a pleasing device. It cost nothing to roll up a slice of bread and butter. Her fingers had doubtless done the rolling, and yet it gave quite a different taste to the food. "What made you give that house to Mrs. Hullins?" she asked him suddenly, with a candour that seemed to demand candour. "Oh," he said, "just a lark. I thought I would. It came to me all in a second, and I did." She shook her head. "Strange boy," she observed. There was a pause. "It was something Charlie Fearns said, wasn't it?" she inquired. She uttered the name Charlie Fearns with a certain faint hint of disdain, as if indicating to Denry that of course she and Denry were quite able to put Fearns into his proper place in the scheme of things. "Oh," he said, "so you know all about it?" "Well," said she, "naturally it was all over the town. Mrs. Fearns's girl, Annunciata, what a name, eh? Is one of my pupils, the youngest, in fact." "Well," said he, after another pause, "I wasn't going to have Fearns coming the Duke over me." She smiled sympathetically. He felt that they understood each other deeply. "You'll find some cigarettes in that box," she said, when he had been there 30 minutes, and pointed to the mantelpiece. "Sure you don't mind?" he murmured. She raised her eyebrows. There was also a silver matchbox in the larger box. No detail lacked. It seemed to him that he stood on a mountain, and had only to walk down a winding path in order to enter the promised land. He was decidedly pleased with the worldly way in which he had said, "Sure you don't mind?" He puffed out smoke delicately, and, the cigarette between his lips, as with his left hand he waved the match into extinction, he demanded, "You smoke?" "Yes," she said, "but not in public. I know what you men are." This was in the early, timid days of feminine smoking. "I assure you," he protested, and pushed the box towards her, but she would not smoke. "It isn't that I mind you," she said. "Not at all. But I'm not well. I've got a frightful headache." He put on a concerned expression. "I thought you looked rather pale," he said awkwardly. "Pale!" She repeated the word. "You should have seen me this morning. I have fits of dizziness, you know, too. The doctor says it's nothing but dyspepsia. However, don't let's talk about poor little me and my silly complaints. Perhaps the tea will do me good." He protested again, but his experience of intimate civilization was too brief to allow him to protest with effectiveness. The truth was, he could not say these things naturally. He had to compose them and then pronounce them, and the result failed in the necessary air of spontaneity. He could not help thinking what marvellous self-control women had. Now, when he had a headache, which happily was seldom, he could think of nothing else and talk of nothing else. The entire universe consisted solely of his headache. And here she was overcome with a headache, and during more than half an hour had not even mentioned it. She began talking gossip about the Fearnses and the Swetnams, and she mentioned rumours concerning Henry Mynors, who had scruples against dancing, and Anna Tellwright, the daughter of that rich old skinflint Ephraim Tellwright. No mistake, she was on the inside of things in Bursley society. It was just as if she had removed the front walls of every house and examined every room at her leisure with minute particularity. But of course a teacher of dancing had opportunities. Denry had to pretend to be nearly as omniscient as she was. Then she broke off without warning, and lay back in her chair. "I wonder if you'd mind going into the barn for me," she murmured. She generally referred to her academy as the barn. It had once been a warehouse. He jumped up. "Certainly," he said, very eager. "I think you'll find a small bottle of eau de Cologne on the top of the piano," she said, and shut her eyes. He hastened away, full of his mission, and feeling himself to be a terrific cavalier and guardian of weak women. He felt keenly that he must be equal to the situation. Yes, the small bottle of eau de Cologne was on the top of the piano. He seized it and bore it to her on the wings of chivalry. He had not been aware that eau de Cologne was a remedy for, or a palliative of, headaches. She opened her eyes, and with a great effort tried to be bright and better. But it was a failure. She took the stopper out of the bottle, and sniffed first at the stopper and then at the bottle. Then she spilled a few drops of the liquid on her handkerchief, and applied the handkerchief to her temples. "It's easier," she said. "Sure?" he asked. He did not know what to do with himself, whether to sit down and feign that she was well, or to remain standing in an attitude of respectful and grave anxiety. He thought he ought to depart. Yet would it not be ungallant to desert her under the circumstances? She was alone. She had no servant, only an occasional charwoman. She nodded with brave, false gaiety, and then she had a relapse. "Don't you think you'd better lie down?" he suggested in more masterful accents, and added, "And I'll go. You ought to lie down. It's the only thing." He was now speaking to her like a wise uncle. "Oh no," she said, without conviction. "Besides, you can't go till I've paid you." It was on the tip of his tongue to say, "Oh, don't bother about that now." But he restrained himself. There was a notable core of common sense in Denry. He had been puzzling how he might neatly mention the rent while departing in a hurry, so that she might lie down. And now she had solved the difficulty for him. She stretched out her arm and picked up a bunch of keys from a basket on a little table. "You might just unlock that desk for me, will you?" she said. And further, as she went through the keys one by one to select the right key. "Each quarter I've put your precious Mr. Herbert Calvert's rent in a drawer in that desk. Here's the key." She held up the whole ring by the chosen key, and he accepted it. And she lay back once more in her chair, exhausted by her exertions. "You must turn the key sharply in the lock," she said weakly, as he fumbled at the locked part of the desk. So he turned the key sharply. "You'll see a bag in a little drawer on the right," she murmured. The key turned round and round. It had begun by resisting, but now it yielded too easily. "It doesn't seem to open," he said, feeling clumsy. The key clicked and slid, and the other keys rattled together. "Oh yes," she replied. "I opened it quite easily this morning. It is a bit catchy." The key kept going round and round. "Here, I'll do it," she said wearily. "Oh no," he urged. But she rose courageously and tottered to the desk and took the bunch from him. "I'm afraid you've broken something in the lock," she announced with gentle resignation, after she had tried to open the desk and failed. "Have I?" he mumbled. He knew that he was not shining. "Would you mind calling in at Allman's," she said, resuming her chair, "and tell them to send a man down at once to pick the lock. There's nothing else for it. Or perhaps you'd better say first thing to-morrow morning, and then as soon as he's done it I'll call and pay you the money myself. And you might tell your precious Mr. Herbert Calvert that next quarter I shall give notice to leave." "Don't you trouble to call, please," said he. "I can easily pop in here." She sped him away in an enigmatic tone. He could not be sure whether he had succeeded or failed in her estimation as a man of the world and a partaker of